Okay, boys and girls, we're now up to chapter 3, No Takebacks. Bobby Jean and I pains to assure Mom and Dad that Susie was probably perfectly fine and safe over at Corey Cormier's place. We shouldn't have said probably. Mom's eyes became like two chocolate brown lasers slicing through us from our bedroom doorway. Dad stood in the hall behind her. Unbelievable, he muttered. Get in the car, Mom said in a small, tight voice, a voice that meant massive trouble. Her voice had escalated right through shouting mode into a high, quiet, dogs only range. Just to be perfectly clear, Bobby Jean and I were the dogs in this scenario. We scurried out to Mom's station wagon with our tails between our legs. Mrs. Cormier opened the screen door and immediately pushed Susie into Mom's arms. I'm so sorry. I was absolutely horrified when Corey came home with her. Of course, I would have brought her back over to you right away, but he wouldn't tell me who she was. She glared over her shoulder. Corey Cormier was seated at the dining room table, head bowed. Thank you, Mom said. She kissed Susie's sleepy, slobbery face and held her close. The enormity of our recent stupidity washed over me. Come in, Mrs. Cormier. Come in, Mrs. Cormier said, pushing the screen door wider. All boys on the couch. We slunk inside. Corey scooted away from the table and joined us. The couch was a threadbare blue stripy thing with cushions flattened from long use. I sat on one side, Corey on the other, Bobby Jean in the middle. Mom and Mrs. Cormier stood in front of us, double-barrel mom stare. We were in deep doo-doo. Quicksand deep. Explain yourselves. Caleb and Bobby gave her to me. Corey said, I didn't steal her. It was a fair trade, Bobby Jean blurted out. Corey Cormier's eyes grew wide and terrified. Mom glared at us. Your sister is not a form of currency, she snapped. Trade for what? Mrs. Cormier asked, eyeing us suspiciously. Corey Cormier's desperate gaze pierced me. I grabbed Bobby Jean's arm. Corey wanted a sister. He was going to show us some basketball tricks, I said, and let us share his hoop. Instead, the three of us will spend that time doing extra chores together, Mom said. Like babysitting, I wanted to ask, but I didn't think they'll find it funny. For the next 4 weeks, Mrs. Cormier added, but that would be almost the whole rest of our summer vacation. 1 hour a day, said Mom. An hour a day with Corey Cormier? No way. Sometimes here and sometimes at the Franklins, said Mrs. Cormier. Plenty of odd jobs to be done, Mom added. You'll be busy enough. They spoke in the exact same tone of voice. Mom mad. Did they plan this somehow, or can they read each other's mind? Like they could obviously read ours. Do you understand? We nodded. Franklin boys, Mom whisked a finger in front of us. Car. Bobby Jean let out a big breath. Our trial was over. Time to go home. As we slid toward the door, Corey Cormier shot me a last grateful look. He was almost smiling. I don't know what he had to be so happy about. He was still in the hot mess that we were. Then his eyes narrowed. I'm coming for you, he mouthed. Over breakfast, Mom announced that Corey Cormier would be coming over at 10 to do chores with us. You're going to weed the garden, and then you're going to string up the new chicken wire Dad bought to keep the rabbits out. The chicken wire was not exactly new. It had been leaned up against the side of the house since April. I didn't mind I didn't much mind weeding the garden, usually. Doing it with Corey, well, these were consequences of trying to be unordinary. Like Dad always says, when you act too big for your britches, the world has a way of slapping you down. I leaned back. I leaned over and gave Susie a little coochie coochie coo under her bed. She squawked and banged her rubber spoon. Applesauce splatter. Great, Mom said. That's perfect, Caleb. She slung the dish towel over her shoulder and wiped up the spots on the table. I slid into my seat across from Bobby Jean. I knew enough to keep my mouth shut, even though it wasn't fair for Mom to call me out on that one. Susie would sure enough splatter applesauce whether I did anything or not. There was a bowl of it on the table for the rest of us too. I spooned a generous helping onto my plate. Bobby Jean looked pointedly at me over the potato pancakes. He kept stretching his eyes all big and waggling his eyebrows. He was trying to do the thing where we communicate without talking, but it only worked some of the time. Later, I mouthed to him. When the phone rang, Mom retreated to the other side of the kitchen. Hi, Camille. Yes, send him over any time. Bobby Jean leaned in. Gotta hide them now. Okay, boys and girls, that is the end of chapter 3.